Usually confession is the best at the very beginning of Mass, but I have a confession to make at the beginning of this homily. I had this wonderful, erudite introduction to my homily, something befitting people that come to wash you. And then yesterday happened. My confession is, I am addicted to comic strips. And in yesterday's Post-Dispatch, there was this comic called Pearls Before Swine. I don't always watch it, but yesterday I read it. And to me, it encapsulates today's gospel. It's about a pig and a mouse. And the mouse says, I think the world's religions are right. The key to life is to love others. Do you really think you can do that, the pig says. Of course. Except the annoying ones. Those I'll hit with a stick. The pig responds, I don't remember that in Scripture. And the mouse ends by saying, yes, you only have to love the ones who are friendly to you. The mouse and the scribe were not totally different. Wishing to justify himself, the scribe asked, who is my neighbor? When you think about that and analyze that question, what the scribe was asking Jesus is, what is it in that person that makes her or him neighbor to me? What are the qualities there that deserve neighborliness? And now think of the Good Samaritan within those terms. Because what Jesus is saying is totally reversing the question. Not what in them deserves being neighbor, but what in me. A man goes from Jerusalem to Jericho and comes across a man half dead. A Levite has passed by. A priest has passed by. But he has compassion. Let's stop, because I tend to think 2,000 years later that doesn't hit us the way it should be. Priests and Levites are not bad people, and Jesus, I don't think, is saying anything about the religion of the Jews. Rather, the priest and the Levite were calculating consequences. To touch this man would have made them both ritually impure for temple worship. They cannot touch blood. And so they began thinking, what is better? Interestingly, the beginning of that whole gospel is love for God and love for neighbor. But the Samaritan has compassion and helps. Again, let's step back. That is not a neutral statement. While there were consequences for the Levite and the priest, I am positive there were consequences for the Samaritan. How would we read this if rather than Samaritan and Jew, we would hear Israeli and Palestinian? Samaritans and Jews were enemies. I am positive that Jews did not want to touch Samaritans, and Samaritans did not want to touch Jews. And I can imagine the Samaritan returning to his village and his good friends asking, and what happened to you along the way? Well, this person was beaten, and I helped him. We know all the Samaritans on the way. Who was it? Well, it wasn't a Samaritan. A Greek? Another foreigner? It was a Jew. You did what? Do you know how they treat us? Do you know that they are our enemies? Do you know that they want to abolish us and who we are? And you helped him? Well, what else did you do? You took him to an inn and you paid for his stay? Did he even thank you? The consequences of that compassion could have led even to his own being ostracized by his own friend, that Jew lover. And yet the man had compassion. It was not something in the man beset by robbers that demanded that he do it. It was his own life, his own character, his being a person of mercy. Let's jump now to today. I tend to think, at least for myself, and I might be the only one here in this congregation, I still tend to see neighborliness in that person, not in me. I am old enough to remember when political issues dealt with who are the deserving poor. Not people who deserved to be poor, but people who were poor who somehow deserved our help. Something in them, not something in me. Even today, as we deal with the difficult issue of immigration, what is tended to really affect the imagination of people are the fact that children are being kept in such squalid conditions at our border. Something about them. They are young, they are impressionable, they are innocent. And yet that compassion was not there when adults were in those same squalid conditions. What in us allows us to be compassionate to the other? What in us allows us to move out to the other no matter who they are, because the love of Christ has so much filled us that we could do nothing else? And I think that is the question of the Good Samaritan. That is the question we're being asked today. What in our faith forces us, compels us to share the love of Christ with others, not only intellectually, but through the works we do? Jesus changed the question of the Samaritan. Who is my neighbor became who showed himself to be neighbor. The scribe answered, the one who had mercy, the one who had compassion. Jesus answered that scribe, and he raises the same question and demand for each and every one of us. Go and do likewise.